Today we are taking a look at the food in Minecraft. What is the absolute best food to eat, but also how does the hunger system in Minecraft actually work? How do I know what is the best food to eat? So here we are inside of Minecraft, and this took a lot of time to make, I will be honest. This is really the best, most detailed view of food you will ever see in any video, because this is just insanity what I have done for today's video. So first, before we get into exactly what food is the best to eat, and we're also going to cover what is some of the worst food to eat, we are going to talk a little bit about food and saturation. So you've always seen these hunger haunches on your hotbar whenever you're playing Minecraft. But what you may not know is that there is another hunger system buried behind those hunger points. You have 20 hunger points because each of these little hunger haunches can be a half hunger haunch as well. So 10 of the little hunger points that show up above your hotbar, well, that's divided by 2, so you have 20 points that your hunger can be at. But behind those hunger, you can have the same 20 points of saturation. So you may have heard of saturation, and that is sort of your secondary hunger bar before this one that's visible actually begins to go down. So you may have noticed before in Minecraft, if you eat some food, it takes a while before your hunger bar actually starts to jiggle and wiggle and before you start to actually lose that food. That's because behind the scenes, there is a virtual second hunger bar also back there that is going to deplete first, and then the one that's visible to you will deplete second. Now, it's not quite as simple as just eating more food than your hunger bar to get that saturation. Every single food in Minecraft has a hunger value and a saturation value, and you can see that here because also the saturation value, by the way, is a dot number, so it's not always a exact half. Where on the food points, you can see that we always have either full food or this is like a half food. So it's a little bit simpler because you're either at 3 points, which is 1.5 hunger haunches, or 4 points, which would be 2 hunger haunches. But with saturation, you can have a lot more varying degrees. So like right here, we have basically 0.1 hunger haunch or 0.2 points in saturation. So saturation is a little bit more detailed on the back end. So you may be thinking, okay, well, if I just eat all past my hunger bar, then that'll overflow into saturation. That's not true. You have a separate saturation and a separate hunger bar whenever you eat food, and just because you overflow your hunger bar does not mean that you're pouring that back into your saturation. Also, saturation can never get higher than your hunger level. So if you're sitting here at 6 hunger haunches, and then and you ate up to that, well, your saturation will actually never go above that number. So if you only have 2 hunger and you ate something with really high saturation, something over here that we're going to talk about later, then you're not actually going to have more saturation than hunger. You're always going to max out. Both numbers will cap at whatever the one that's visible to you, the hunger, is showing. So let's talk about some foods that are good and some foods that are bad and some foods that are surprisingly bad or good. Let's start off with some of the bad stuff. Way here at the end of the line, you can see I kind of color coded everything. So we got red as bad, orange as not great, yellow as normal, green as good, and diamond as amazing, the absolute best food to eat. And the reason and how you sort of mathematically calculate that is what is their food to saturation level and how much does it actually give you back in general. So right here at the very bottom of the list, we have rotten flesh, and you may even consider pufferfish to be worse than that, because with pufferfish, you're guaranteed to be poisoned, and whenever you're poisoned, that takes away your hearts, and hearts will use up your saturation and your hunger in order to heal you again. So you might want to put, if you're doing your own sort of spreadsheet of the worst food ever, then pufferfish may need to be at the very bottom of that. Now, cake, you might think, okay, wait, why is pufferfish, which poisons you, and cake on the same level? Or cookies? Wouldn't these be so much better for you to eat? While cake does restore an awful lot of food, it does really bad at saturation. So you're going to get hungry really, really quickly after eating cake, which is a bummer. This is a full cake, by the way, and this is just a single slice of cake. So you can see that a single slice of cake, that'll restore a full hunger, but it will only do 0.2, and actually that's 0.4 points. 0.2 of a hunger haunch. It gets complicated because you got points that, it takes 2 points to make a hunger haunch, and so that can get confusing. So we're going to skip a few here, things that you'd probably assume are not so great. By the way, here's honey. It restores 3 food haunches and 1.2 of the saturation on the back end. You got some raw chicken here. Pumpkin pie, kind of a sad affair here. Pumpkin pie is in with the chicken as a not so great food to consume. Chorus fruit, it's pretty funny. A whole bunch of raw stuff. Poisonous potatoes, which of course you'd get the poison effect. That's not taken into account here when you're calculating how bad things are. And also kelp here is sort of in this weird position of maybe being in the worst or maybe being in an okay territory. It restores half of a hunger haunch and then a 0.3 unsaturation. So as you move up this ladder here, you start to get more and more into territories where your saturation and your food are going to match. So rabbit stew is sort of the first instance where we see that the saturation is actually more than the hunger that you get. And these are the type of foods that I like to have, mostly because you don't normally wait until you're all the way down on your health bar on your food until you eat. You're going to eat when you're hungry, like the kind of the moment that you're hungry. So you really want something that's going to give you a ton of saturation on the back end from a small amount of food that you eat. And so this rabbit stew will give you 5 hunger haunches, but it'll give you 6 in saturation, which is really, really nice. And so you can kind of see up here, these are all the normal foods, bread, cooked all the cooked meats, basically. And you have beetroot up here, and beetroot's interesting because it's half a food, but 0.6 in saturation. So if you were really, really low, you may want to eat this to get all the way up. But if you have a lot, if you have a lot of hunger, you're probably going to want to eat more down here with the rabbit stew, because you eat 1 rabbit stew, and especially if your hunger is all the way full, then your saturation will go all the way up to 6 points. So rabbit stew is a great thing to eat. These aren't in order once they're inside of their category here. So this category is almost kind of like worst to best inside of that category. Now we're in the good foods to eat, and something surprising is that spider eye is in this list. And the reason is because if you ignore the fact that it may poison you, it's actually a good food because it will give you a full food haunch, but then 1.6 saturation on the back end, which is a great ratio. If you look at most of these, that's 1.5. You almost never get 1.5. So your spider eye here is actually a really great food to eat, even though it has the bad effect of giving you poison. And then a lot of the traditional stuff that you expect is good food to eat, and that includes all of your cooked meats, your pork chops and steaks, and you can see here that the mutton only gives you 3 food, but the steak and pork chop gives you 4. So all of those things that you would expect. Up here at the very top, this is suspicious stew with a dandelion or blue orchid as the ingredient. This will give you an absolutely insane number of saturation, because it gives you the saturation effect whenever you eat it. So this will actually give you more saturation than you can actually have. So if you count this out, it ends right here. This is the 10th. So this is as much as you could possibly ever have. It actually gives you 10.6 on the scale here for your food. So this type of meal would be perfect to eat if you are low on hearts, because when you regenerate hearts, that'll eat into your saturation. So if you're really low on hearts and you eat this, it'll actually regenerate and still give you great saturation, even if you're full on your hearts. So that's really nice to have. Now we get into the crazy tier of food, and these ratios are just insane when it comes to how much food it gives you and how much saturation on the back end. Golden carrots are my favorite thing to consume whenever I'm at that point where I have a gold farm, where I have a carrot farm, and I'll just combine them together, because for the 3 food, it will give you an incredible amount, 7.2 saturation. So if you're only down a single food haunch and you eat this, your saturation will immediately be at 7.2, which is awesome. No other food, I mean, unless if you're, talking about all this sort of stuff, it's just a really, really great amount of food. So if you only had 1 food haunch missing and you ate, say, this steak, here, let's focus on steak, that'll give you 6.4 in saturation. Golden carrots give you 7.2. Now, you also have some things up here like the golden apple and the enchanted apple. Those are exactly the same, where they revive you to food, but they also will give you enough saturation, 4.8 saturation on the back end whenever you eat them. But when you start getting up into this upper level, really any of these foods are going to be great, because most likely you're looking at the situation where you are only down a single hunger haunch, you're eating one thing to get as much saturation on the back end as you can, and really steak being at 6.4 and golden carrots being at 7.2, that is not that big of a difference for you to really need to focus on getting carrots if you have a good steak and or pork chop farm for you to have lots of food. And same sort of thing up here. Once you start getting into the good foods, really you're just looking at how much saturation it will give to you, and also how convenient it is to carry it around. So you have chicken over here. Chicken is super convenient to make because of all the different chicken farms that we have. That is 3.6 saturation, so that'll only, not give you a ton of time on the back side of things. But if you were able to upgrade that to a cow farm or a pig farm, then you'd be able to have 6.4. And who wants, the problem with suspicious stew is it doesn't stack, and so you can't really carry it around to get absurd amounts of saturation. But maybe you could have a station set up at your base if you're walking around and you know that you're hungry. Well, I can walk over here and grab a suspicious stew. That way I will have completely full saturation for a long, long time. There's just no way to get a better saturation than suspicious stew. There you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video. It took a lot of work to make it. Those little hunger haunch like images, those are all, that was I had to Photoshop each one of those. It was quite a lot. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, because a lot of effort went into it. Thanks so much for watching this episode of OMG Craft. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a big ol' thumbs up. Also, make sure you subscribe for future videos, tips, tricks, tutorials, and spotlights here on OMG Craft. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.